I'm behind. So I got to move fairly fast. I ended up last time talking about Sargon and Hammurabi. In the case of, well, I'll get back to Hammurabi in a minute, but one thing I forgot to mention, their writing. That's actually, I ought to do it this way. Cuneiform. Now, cuneiform evolved over time, but your book has a sample of it. Anyway, yeah, sample of it on page 15 in my book. Somebody knocked on their phone. Oh, okay. Cuneiform, the basic idea was, it started out they would write with a stick, like, or some kind of pen, but then they got the idea they could go faster if they could take a wedge and just simply hit the wedge, bang, and they got the character, bang, another character. Then to get the character going down, they just simply moved 90 degrees. And at one point, the writing evolved to where the wedges were always going either from left to right or up to down. But now, at some points, they got to that sometimes some of the languages would use a 45-degree angle straight across. And again, they would write it with a wedge, just go bang, 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 bang. Just simply move the wrist 90 degrees and stamp the character. They had a wedge shape. The most common symbol, and this is the only one I ever learned, is this is their name for heaven or God. Anyway, cuneiform writing, we have more cuneiform text, folk, than we have text for the Greeks and Romans and Persians and Assyrians combined. There are hundreds of thousands of cuneiform tablets, and when I was in graduate school, they'd tell us that many of them have not been read. Now, 42 years later, they're still saying many of the old cuneiform texts have not been read. I once thought I could learn cuneiform, but maybe if I'd have stayed with it, I never did really actually learn it. All right, Hammurabi. Again, he was a conqueror. He started off, again, picking on, you might say, one of his weaker neighbors, but he did what the Romans were to do later. Once he conquered a city, he would get that city on his side by convincing that city they'd have advantages to trade with him, and he would trade with them in very lenient terms and encourage their sons to marry the other conquered city's daughters or vice versa, and use their army alongside of his to help conquer another city-state. And after 30 years, he had united all of this area, which his capital city was Babylon. And this was the first known Babylonian empire. Now again, if you study the history of Babylon, you might learn that there are rumors that there had been an earlier Babylonian empire under Nimrod. But anyway, Hammurabi built up another Babylonian empire. This Babylonian empire only lasted a couple of generations, and then another Babylonian empire was built up 1,000 years later, maybe 1,200 years later, by King Nebuchadnezzar. So Babylon rose and fell and rose and fell and might have risen and fell again. Babylon lay in a wide open plain, unprotected by anything except its own military. It was attacked often, destroyed, rebuilt, attacked again, and finally was gradually faded out of existence. And its inhabitants moved to Baghdad. Now, Hammurabi is not just remembered as a conqueror, he's mainly remembered for his law code. Your book does show some examples of his law code. Basically, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. If a man killed a young woman to worship, if a man struck a young woman and she died, his own daughter was to be killed in the place of the young woman that he had killed. I mean, that's just law numbers 209 and 210, 209 and 210. Pardon me, 211 and 212. 210 also, 212, yeah.
So like we need to know years and stuff?
What's that?
We need to know years and all that?
No, don't worry about that. Yeah, about the dates. Did you mean dates?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Until we come to about 750 BCE, there are no absolute dates known for the ancient world. And that, again, gives a lot of ancient stories the character of a fairy tale. There have been many a scholar try to say, well, exactly when did Hammurabi live? And folk, the dates for his life are anywhere from, I catch his post, 1200 BCE to 1800 BCE. We simply don't know. In the case of Zoroaster, they put a date for him anywhere from 300 BCE to 1000 BCE, and even some people question whether a man like that ever actually existed. What is wrong with the dating in the ancient world? Simple thing. Number one was they fudged. Now, in modern 21st century America, it's very difficult to fudge history owing to the fact that history is taught in open college classes with open textbooks, and no historian today is going to try to change the date of Lincoln's birth because it was well documented at the time by his parents. But now I'm going to give you an example of the way it's known as the ancient major history. There was a period of time in our country when we had two presidents. When Abraham Lincoln was president, Jefferson Davis was also president of a big part of the country. Well, if this were Egypt, and an Egyptian scholar were writing history, he could put Abraham Lincoln, and right after Lincoln put Jefferson Davis, and then put Andrew Johnson, and by so doing, he would have added 4 years to our country's history. Jefferson Davis was president for almost 4 years. Why to do that? They tried to make their society look older than anyone else's, and also try to make it look like their society that had always been united. Now, especially this would be the case if some historian decided to take all the governors of every state that we've had since the Union was formed and make them all to be presidents. You could add more than 2,000 years to American history. It's believed that the Egyptians and some of these Assyrians and Babylonians did just that. That is why dating is so difficult in the ancient world. So difficult. Now later, in the semester, there will be a few dates to learn. I'll put them on a board. It's not overly emphasized. But we have a history of the Sumerian Empire, for instance, that said this king reigned this many years, and after that, well, but this many years compared to what? And who was the king of Egypt at the time? Well, the Egyptian history is so distorted and so whacked up that you just simply cannot match up this date with that date. Again, it's their scholars are a lot to blame. Anyway, now about Hammurabi's law code, a lot of it looks like the law of Moses, to the point where a lot of scholars have wondered if Moses, Hammurabi is believed to have lived before Moses, have wondered if Moses did not copy Hammurabi. After all, Moses grew up in Pharaoh's house and was educated by the Egyptian private scholars, Egyptian tutors who also tutored Pharaoh's children. So there are persons who say that Moses might have been influenced by Hammurabi. Again, you can handle that any way you want to. There are some seeming similarities. Anyway, your book goes into a little bit of detail about the Code of Hammurabi. Just know that he's remembered largely for his law code, which is given in detail because we found that the copy of it is pictured on page 14. Okay. Religion, I've already mentioned. Now, I do have a place, a page in our college about the Sumerian gods. Essentially, they believed that the first god to come down from heaven was Anu, And the Greeks believed somewhat similarly, and they called him Uranus. And if you look at the word Uranus closely enough, here's the word Anu in the word Uranus. Anyway, Anu was first. In Greek mythology, Uranus was the father of Saturn, and Saturn the father of Zeus. In Sumerian mythology, Anu was the father of Enki and Enlil. Enlil is said to be the god of storms, and he has been put on beside of Jupiter, Zeus, Jupiter, the god of thunder, Zeus, the god of thunder, Thor, also the god of thunder. Some people believe that these were the same god, but under a different name. Enki, the god of the earth. These gods supposedly taught mankind the arts of civilization. And oh yeah, I did not mention last time, the Sumerians are credited with inventing the wheel. We often was taught when I was younger that some caveman one day invented a wheel, but actually it's believed to have been the invention of the Sumerians. They did a lot of writing, and I've already mentioned we have a lot of written records of their deeds. Oh yes, something I must say about their religion. Yeah, at first these deities were not necessarily worshipped as gods, but that was to come later. And at first they were not looked on as being statues. Now after supposedly these gods had a living presence in their temples, then after these gods left the earth for whatever reason, or left them, they put up statues of them in their temples, and they worshiped the statues in the place of their gods. But their religion was polytheistic. That means the worship of many gods. Essentially, the sun was God, the moon was God, all the planets were God. Venus especially was important. Venus, the bright woman, goddess of fertility, goddess of sex, goddess of love. And now, as opposed to monotheism, the worship of only one God. Now, most of the Western world today is monotheistic, and that's somewhat amazing because 3,000 years ago, almost all of the world were polytheistic. The Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, the Greeks, the Romans, all of them were polytheistic. Now, there are scholars who believe that the farther back you go, you eventually get to where the original religion of mankind was monotheism. And then the monotheism gave way to polytheism. But then as time went on, polytheism gave way once again to monotheism. Now, folks, what I'm about to say, you can disagree with it if you want to, but the question might come up, well, why is it important? What difference does it make? Okay, being an old man, I guess I keep things around a long time. This little cell phone I have, which, by the way, it is turned off.